think first it's understanding how important the mindset is. You know, you're talking about in the combat sports, in fencing, it wasn't about overpowering my opponent. It was actually seeing where my opponent had weaknesses and using those weaknesses to my advantage with as little effort as possible. The bouts that I had that were the best were the ones that were so simple and so easy.
This is the money. This is the mindset. This is the mentoring podcast. Today, we've got Pericles with us, and we're really going to jump into talking a little bit about one of my favorite things. We're going to talk about mindset, and we're going to talk about money. And one thing when we talk about mindset is what happens up here. But a lot of times we start talking about when we actually having that conversation in our head. You know, I've had this conversation with people before where they say, what language do you speak in your head? Are you speaking French? Are you speaking English? What language are you speaking? And the language that we use is really important. And the formation of that language is the words that we use. And so I want to kind of dive right in and talk about language and talk about using language to our advantage and your perspective of that.
Sure. Well, language actually creates the world in which we live. And I don't think people always realize that. They think about it's an intellectual conversation, but the words that come out of our mouth actually give us the experience that we're going to have of life. And it gives people around us the experience of who we are. So choosing our words very, very wisely is important, because anytime we say I am, whatever follows that is literally creating a world. Whether it's with money, whether it's with joy, happiness, it doesn't make any difference.
When I teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and there's a friend of mine, he is way better than I am. He's an amazing coach out of Brazil. But when he teaches very differently. I teach in a very Americanized way, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I name it, and then I name it, and then I create relations. And out of creating relations, I create objects, and then I create systems and models. And that's a very sort of North American approach to training and orienting data, is really following the taxonomy. And what's interesting is the way that he teaches Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is radically different. And he's Portuguese. Well, he's from Brazil. And so they speak Portuguese. And so it's very flowy. It's almost like a love language with the way that he communicates. And both, hit the same target in the end, but it's totally a different way of using language to be able to relate to something. His is very much like a love, sort of emotional connection with the activity, where mine is a very scientific approach to the activity. And so when you talked about language, that was one thing that we did the preamble. I was like, I can't wait to have a conversation with you, because you know that conversations are important, because words are extremely important. And so when you're a lot of times when people talk is, one thing that I think we suffer from in North America is we grow up with a very sort of fear-based style language, like don't talk to strangers and don't go over there and, never overachieve, like all these things that happen in our head, like you're shooting too high and all of these things. How do we start to debunk or deprogram some of these things that we have in our head and move from that sort of fear-based language to more of a growth-based communication, especially with ourselves?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to really look at what are we declaring about ourselves and the life we want to live with the words that we're saying. And going back to your jiu-jitsu example, I think this is brilliant. We've all seen, let's say, a ballet dancer, and we'll see a ballet dancer who's just technically perfect, but there's something missing. It's like, wow, they're really great, but I'm not pulled into it from my heart. And then we'll see somebody who gets up and they're being the music. They're flowing with the music. It's like the music is emanating from them, and that's what's having their bodies move. And it's very much the same way in how we create our worlds with our own language. Are you speaking from your heart center? Are you speaking from a place of joy, happiness, and fulfillment? Or are we speaking from an intellectual point of view, and a point of view that's very, very, I'll say, rote, kind of pre-programmed from when we were younger? When we're speaking from our heart, when we're connected from that heart center, the world that we create, the world that we live in becomes distinct and becomes something that other people want to be a part of, who are vibrating at that similar frequency. So it's important to remember that it isn't just what you're thinking. It isn't just what you're saying. Is what you're saying consistent with who you truly are here? And is it creating who you want the world to know you to be? And then feeling what it feels like to live in that world. And suddenly life is different. Because when you look back after a day or a week or a month or a year, you realize, wow, I live in an extraordinary life.
So what you're saying is do both, is
Yes.
really have that system and model, but really the way that you interpret that system and model is through the framework of that joy, through the framework of that connection, that oneness with yourself and the material, in the sense that you become the material and you become sort of the personification of it. And I think that's really interesting, because I think of the tournaments that I win in the tournaments that I've lost. The ones that I lost, I was mechanical. And I went in, I wasn't really dialed in. I'd already won so many, and I was just like, this is just another tournament. And I remember I went into this one match, and the guy comes up, I'm like, I saw through him. I was already on to the next tournament, let alone the next match. And I go up and he gets this chokehold on me, and I'm like, this is a BS chokehold. And then I wake up, a few minutes later, and I'm like, when's the match going to start? And clearly I was not one with the universe at that moment. I wasn't connected to it. I was just, as you say, I was mechanically going through the process.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the other ones where I just had joy, and I was there because it was fun. I was excited, and it just, it was a whole different experience.
Well, you were present. You were, as you said, you were not present in that one match because you were thinking about the next match. You saw through him to the next one. I'm just getting on to the next one. But when we're fully present and engaged, there's a different experience of life. All of our worries and concerns go away because we're present in the now. And using your example of a competition, I used to be a competitive fencer. And I remember there was a time where I took some time off, and then I decided to get back into it. And I was older at that point. I was in my 40s. And I went to this national competition with kids who were 18, 19, 20 years old. But I had been working really hard. And I remember looking at my first pool, and I was watching the guys who were in my pool fence before me. And I was getting present to every single one of them. Like, okay, he does this really well. I'm probably going to lose to him, but this is what he does. And this is what he does. Da, 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 da. And then when I got up to start fencing, I cleaned the floor with every single one of them because I'd let go of all of my concerns and considerations. I'd actually confronted them and surrendered to this is going to be how it's going to be. And then I just went out and fenced my best. And I remember asking one of the guys who was the best in the pool, I thought, and I killed him. And I said, dude, what happened? He's like, you were extraordinary. That's what happened. And it kind of got me present to, wow, if you're really present and focused on what you're doing, the joy and passion, whether you win or lose, is going to be there, but we're always going to do our best.
First of all, I love the fact that you're fencing and that you fence. I think that's so cool. And I find that such an interesting hobby to have. My son is really interested in that, but in our area, there's not a lot of options. But it's such, obviously, were you in France at the time when you were fencing? Or?
No, I actually had stopped when I moved to France, but no, I was out of California. In fact, my coach was in the Olympics. His son was in the Olympics this past Olympics in France, and his son won the bronze medal in men's foil. And I was so excited to see him sitting there coaching his son, because his son wasn't even born when I first started coaching with him. And then, of course, his son was born, etc. But it's, kind of a really great thing to see somebody that you've worked with achieve that kind of success.
Other than boxing and wrestling, and maybe a little bit of breakdancing, because that was a thing, fencing was the one that I really was excited about and watched quite a bit. Oh, no, the other one was those people who climb the walls really fast, the speed climbers.
Yes.
Because that looked fake. That looked like, like the Batman in the 50s where he's going up the wall and you're like, this is not real. Nobody can climb a wall that fast. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And it's interesting because there's so many different personas to an individual. And you see that, you had the fencing background, which, I mean, that in itself is just so incredibly interesting. But you have this really strong mind around the idea of just linguistics and taxonomy and how people can really relate their mindset to that. But, the real thing that you like to dive into is like, how does that pertain to when somebody's trying to generate wealth? And usually when we're talking about it, we can talk it from the perspective of fighting, but I think fighting and business are so intertwined, and I think that's why people love watching combat sports, especially, high performing business types, because there's such a correlation between those two of those. Now,
Yeah.
you talk about the idea of, you know, rebranding and, some concepts so that we can rebrand it in our mind, whether it's, the emergency fund, as people start to build it out. Well, let's rebrand that. Let's call that a wealth fund and start to change the nomenclature within our head. And what are some of the other ones that people need to do as a pivot within their brain to really start to change their mindset around?
I think first it's understanding how important the mindset is. You're talking about in the combat sports, in fencing, it wasn't about overpowering my opponent. It was actually seeing where my opponent had weaknesses and using those weaknesses to my advantage with as little effort as possible. The bouts that I had that were the best were the ones that were so simple and so easy. And in business and in generating money, we don't realize how much we battle with ourselves and our own mindsets when it comes to wanting to be successful. People will do all sorts of work. They'll go online and study manifestation. They'll study stock investing. They'll study all those things, but they ignore the little voice in their head that's saying, you're too stupid. This will never happen for you. You're not smart enough. You're not handsome enough. You're not all those things. And then we think putting something on top of that is going to actually solve the problem. And then we get frustrated. We say, well, I've been manifesting for 6 months now and it's not showing up. It's because you're too stupid. Keeps running the show in the background. And we need to see that. We need to recognize it and stop battling with, I'm too stupid, or I'm not worth it, or money's the root of all evil. That's a really great one I hear all the time. Well, I don't want to become evil. Well, money is not evil. Money's not good. It's just money. It's what we choose to do with it once we have it. It's the same thing with power or fame. Who do we want to be when we've got power or fame or money? That's what we want to focus on. So we get what we focus on. So we're focusing on, as you said, the emergency fund. We're going to create emergencies because that's what we're focused on. But if we're creating and building a wealth fund and our focus is on that, wow, we're just going to keep building wealth. And it's the same thing around the mindset of what's stopping you? What are you battling with when it comes to creating the kind of wealth and success that you want? And it's important for us to get quiet and listen to what's being said in the unsaid when we're really quiet, because that's the thing. That's like the programming in the computer that's running the show. And until we notice, I like to call them blocks in the flow of money. Until we notice those blocks and then clear them, they're going to continue to run the show.
So the way that you're that individual who has the, I'm too stupid and tries to create the blanket of success is almost akin to somebody who says, I'm too stupid. I'm going to pick up a bottle of vodka and drink away my problems. And they're looking at as almost a way to solve a problem that just never will be able to solve. And rather than actually focusing on the problem.
Yes, and that is definitely one way that it can manifest. But I like to look at it from the perspective of building a house and having a really bad foundation. But we don't even think about the foundation. We don't look at the foundation. We just think about, I want to have this beautiful home and I want to have all these amazing things. But we've neglected the most important thing, which is the foundation going to hold up the structure that you're building? And that foundation, if it's cracked, if it's crumbly, is that I'm too stupid, I'm not good enough, money's the root of all evil. Until we get clear about that, and we shore up our foundation around our money mindset, we're never going to be able to create the kind of wealth, the kind of happiness, the kind of fulfillment that we're looking for. We may have some successes, but it will be a struggle, and we will not have the kind of experience around the successes we really want.
So as the architect of somebody's life who's looking at building that house that's massively successful and stands for, decades and generations. What, as the foundation builder, what is a tool set that they could use to ensure that foundation is going to have strength?
The first thing, I'll give you a 3-step process. And this is what I give to anyone who's interested in this kind of conversation. The first thing you want to do is you need to notice the negative conversations that you have around money. So let's just take, for example, the money is the root of all evil. I was raised in that. That's just something that my parents never really said it, but you could see that the way they related to it was this concern around money, corrupting and being bad and all these kinds of things. And so I looked at it and noticed it when I first started creating these distinctions, like, whoa, that's a conversation I've had for a very long time. So we need to notice the conversation and own it. Not give it validity, not give it agreement, but just own, yep, there's that conversation. I've had this conversation for decades. Money's the root of all evil. I can own that. I can admit that that's been there. And then the second step is actually let it go. And this seemingly is easy, but it is the hardest step, because it's kind of like the person who's addicted to candy saying, I'm no longer going to have candy. But I want the candy, right? We're so used to it. We're so addicted to that conversation. It's a challenge to let it go. And so you're going to say out loud, I let go of that conversation. I release it into the care of whoever it is that's there for you, God, the universe, the trees outside, the ocean, whatever. I release it into the care of the universe. It no longer has dominion over me. It no longer has space in my psyche. It is no longer part of my conversation. I release it into the care of the universe to do with as you see fit. And you do that until you have a sense of like a little bit of relief, a little bit of release. It won't be completely gone, but you'll feel it like, whoa, I felt it kind of go away. And then in that moment, we've created this tiny little space. That's when we're going to create through our language and through our heart, who is it you want to be with money? What relationship do you want with money? Money flows to me easily and abundantly every single day. Money provides me with opportunities that I want in my life, whatever it is for you, and then write it down. Because what we've created in that moment, kind of like in the galaxy, we've created a new star, but that new star is fledgling and we need to nurture it. We need to focus on it. And so we write it down, have it by your bed. You want to have it on your computer screen, have it on your mirror in the bathroom, and continue to read it and feel it every time you say it. And then every time that old conversation comes up, and it will, do the same 3-step. There's that old conversation. I release it. That's no longer mine. This is who I am with regards to money from now on. And then as you do this over time, what you will find is that conversation will become the predominant conversation in your life. And the old conversation will get quieter and quieter and quieter and less frequent and less frequent. And you will notice, whoa, money starts to flow easily and abundantly in my life everywhere I look. I find money everywhere I look. New opportunities to make money start to show up. And that's the world that you've created through that language, but also through that feeling. And it's so important. I can't emphasize this enough. You have to feel it, because when we feel it, we shift our vibrational frequency. And that vibrational frequency that we're kicking off is what attracts to us things that are similar to it.
Yeah, that's a lot for, I think, people to unpack, is the idea that, they can really create a sense of agency by disassociating themselves from the idea. And if they can do that, that's how they can kind of purge it, because they then become in control because they are releasing it. And so therefore they are the one who's in charge. They have agency over themselves and their own outcomes. And then they can they can make room for that thing, whatever that new thing is, whether it's financial prosperity, whether it's health, whatever their target is that ability that they can say, I can now have room for that other thing that this was once taking place, in my mind.
Yes. And there's both brain science and energetic science that support this 3-step process. And if you like, I can take you very quickly through the brain science and the energetic science.
Yeah, for sure.
If you want, we can. So let's look at the brain science. Dr. Joe Dispenza is phenomenal about this. I love his work. And he's talking about neural pathways. And these neural pathways are getting created all the time. And there are over 1 trillion neural pathways in every one of our brains. That's more stars in our galaxy, right? And so when we've got a neural pathway that's been firing and wiring together for years or decades, it gets very, very strong. It's kind of like a well-grooved path in the ground. Water will just take it very easily. So when we've got some kind of trigger, we instantly go to that neural pathway and it just starts firing. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. Money's the root of all evil, whatever that is. When we notice it, we recognize it, as you said, we take control of it. It no longer is running the show because we've moved it from that survival part of our brain to the frontal cortex, which is where critical thinking, creative thinking starts to occur. And then when we let it go, we're actively breaking that neural pathway down so that it is no longer as strong. And then when we declare who we are, we're creating a whole new neural pathway. Just like I said, the star in the universe, we're creating this new little baby star, and we want to nurture it. We want those neural pathways to get stronger and stronger and stronger, which is why we keep repeating it, keep feeling it. That will make it stronger and stronger much more quickly. And then on the energetic side, if you look at the anatomy of an atom, the majority of an atom is space. It's energy holding the neurons and protons and the nucleus, all of those getting held together by energy. That energy flows or vibrates at a certain frequency. And when we're depressed, we're kicking off a depressed frequency. And so that's going to bring in more depression. It's going to attract more depression. Whereas if we shift that and suddenly we're feeling good, we're feeling energized, we're feeling like what life would be like as this new person, our vibrational frequency shifts. And suddenly we're attracting more of those things that we like into our lives. This is right from Abraham Hicks. This is what they're talking about when they talk about allowing something in, and the law of attraction, vibrating at a frequency that attracts more of what you want versus more of what you don't want.
Well, and it's one of the things that people could listen to this and the idea, they're like, well, that sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo, because it's frequency. Like, I'm all about facts. And so the idea is, empirical data can exist with what we're talking about that can give you that fundamental belief, because there's a lot of things that exist in this universe that we can't see. But if they didn't exist, we wouldn't be here. Things like oxygen. Like, I can't reach out and touch it, but I know it's there because it's keeping me alive every day, because it's feeding my cells. And so I know that I have to be breathing this thing, interfacing with this thing that I can't see, but because it gives me the outcome that I'm looking for, I know that it does exist. I know that I can't just hold my breath, say I don't believe in air anymore, and because I can't see it. And that's the same thing, I think, when you talk about frequency and when you talk about those neural pathways. A lot of times people say, but I can't see that. I can't look into my brain. I can't feel that sense of vibration. But think about when you've been in a room with somebody who has that energy level that just gets you fired up. And for some reason, you just feel like you're operating at a higher degree because you're around them. That's when that frequency is present. And when you have that idea of those neural pathways that are being laid, there's so many times when we do things, when we look at, we've learned a path and we do things just automatically. It's like driving a car. Those pathways are fired in our brain that we know that when we come to the stop sign, we're going to press the brake. We don't have to think about, I need to interface my legs so that they can press that pedal at a specific, it just happens. Yep. And that's the idea is we know these things exist. We have empirical data around it. We just haven't scaled that up in our activity level to the highest level to be operating at the way that we can fix the things that really need to be fixed.
Yeah. And I think your point is really important, because there are people who are listening right now who might think, well, this is woo woo, this is mumbo jumbo. I can't feel it. I can't touch it, or I can't see it. I can't touch it. And I get that. Find the thing that works for you. If it's the neural pathways, great. If it's the energetics, great. If it's not, find the thing that makes you feel good. That is something you can't dispute. Like you said, if you're in the presence of somebody and suddenly they elevate you and you feel good being in their presence, find more people like that to be around and emulate them so that you're kicking off that same thing and you start to feel better. That's a fact. If you feel better, you feel better. There's no other better data than that, and if somebody around you makes you feel good, pull them towards you. If somebody's around you that doesn't make you feel good, look at, is that a relationship I want to continue to nurture, or is that something I need to distance myself from? And then people will say, well, but it's my family. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's your family. I don't care if it's your quote unquote best friend. If they're tearing you down, if they make you feel badly, then you need to reconsider, you ought to reconsider how much time you want to spend with them if you're really committed to having a life where you feel good. Now, if you're not committed to that, that's fine. I have no judgment about it. But if you are in this conversation, surround yourself with people that make you feel good and then go with that. Find the thing that works for you. For some people, it's meditation. For some people, it's hiking. For some people, it's manifestation. I don't care what it is for you. Find the thing that works for you. There is no one right answer for anyone. And anyone who tells you that and that they've got the answer, run like heck, because they are not in it for you. They're in it for themselves.
Well, I have the answer, and it's go to jiu-jitsu. That's my answer all the time. So,
exactly.
I mean, I have the answer.
As
you can run, but just make sure you're running to a gym. But the idea is I think there has to be a very strong delineation between making you feel good and doing things that are easy. And, so there's a lot of people who can make you feel good because, hey, we're going to the bar this weekend and I feel good because we're out having fun and, work's not getting done. I'm not developing myself as, moving myself forward, but we're feeling good. And that's a very different style of feeling good than a productive style of feeling good. So if you could help, describe the differences between those because I want to make that really critical point.
Yeah. And I think the easiest test for this is when it's over and you look back, how do you feel about what you did? Well, I just ate 4 pounds of chocolate and I feel horrible that I did it. In the moment, I felt really good. But after the fact, I'm like, oh, I regret that I did that. That just was not a good choice. Or I went out to the bar with friends and I ended up drinking. And the next morning, I'm like, why did I do that? I wasted all that time. I wasted all that energy and I'm depleting my body. Or did you go out and have a drink? Did you go out and have dinner? And the next morning you wake up and like, it's such an amazing time. I love my friends. We all were having so much fun talking and creating and whatever that is. That's a true test of what works for you. How do you feel about it after it's complete? And if that good feeling carries on, then yes, that's what you want to continue doing. Now, there's also this world of addiction, which can be very, very challenging and something that I don't take lightly at all because I know addiction is very, very difficult sometimes to get over. And when we're in the need of that dopamine hit, we need that addictive substance, whatever it is, whether it's candy or alcohol or drugs or something else. And for some people, we're addicted to drama. We're addicted to stress. We're addicted to problems. And it's the same exact thing. The same dopamine gets triggered when we're in a stressful situation. That's why we look at some people and they just thrive on stress and they create chaos around them. It's because they're addicted to it and they love that feeling. But you want to start to look for yourself, step out of it and look to see, is this really what I want in my life? And if it is, continue it. And if it isn't, then start to make different choices that take you down a path where you're feeling good when you're doing it, when you're thinking about doing it, and then after the fact, when you're thinking back on having done it.
Yeah. And I like how you talk about the different addictions, especially around the idea of stress. And I think there's so many people who are addicted to stress. And I think they think that I got to make it a stressful situation. Stress is what motivates me. I need to have that, I got to have that I feel broke feeling. So therefore I'm working harder. I always, if my back's against the wall, man, that's when I go. And so that they have a heavy addiction to stress. In the fighting world, I can tell you that's when people produce at the least. Like most people, when you talk about training, is when they're in a stressful situation, they're not producing at their highest state. They're producing at their lowest form of training. And if they have a better relationship with stress and they can reduce their stress, they can 10x their training just by their relationship with stress. And when we're looking at somebody, we talk about financial emergencies versus a wealth fund and kind of wrapping it around to the beginning again and around changing that psyche around that. How do you propose that somebody readdresses the relationship with stress and believing that stress helps them produce better outcomes?
Well, I think you want to look at, are you depleted by it? Or after you've completed the task, are you elevated? Are you excited? Are you happy? Are you content? Or are you left empty and you need the next hit? I think a great example of this is we see sometimes with celebrities, people who have fame, and they get this extraordinary amount of fame. And then suddenly they start doing things that seem to us to be absolutely crazy just to get more attention. And we think to ourselves, aren't they famous enough? Why are they leaking, a nude picture or a sex tape, or why did they go out and say X, Y, and Z in the public forum? And all of a sudden, there's this huge outrage or focus on them, and it's because they've lost sight of who they are, and they've become addicted to the fame. I just need more fame. I need more attention, and so they start making very bad choices around getting more attention rather than, whoa, I need to really kind of check myself here. And what's true for me? What is it I really want? Who do I want to be in this world? What do I want to be known for? How do I want to interact with people? Do I want to help and elevate people? Or do I just want to go do things to get more attention focused on me? And the same thing is true with stress. Are you looking to create stress for stress sake? Or are you actually focused on solving whatever the problem is with the least amount of time and the least amount of stress possible so that you get to the outcome that you want? And again, for everybody, the answer is going to be different. For some people, they're going to want to hold on to that stress. That's totally fine. I, again, don't have a judgment about that. That's your choice. But for those who are really committed to not, start to look at what are the different choices that I can make. How can I approach this? How do I normally do this? Well, I normally do this and I upset this person and piss this person off. And that's then how I get started. Okay, I'm going to make different choices now and focus on new choices and see how that goes. And then beta test it, try it out, see or split test it. This didn't work. I tried this. It didn't work. I'm going to try something new. Oh, that worked. Now do more of that.
Yeah, and that goes to the idea, one of my fundamental beliefs, it came from actually Grant Cardone, is the idea of massive imperfect action beats perfect planning. Yep. And because once you get into that moment of actually doing, you're going to have a lens on so many things that you would never see at the planning table. And, relating again back to fencing, if you were sitting there watching it on the couch and saying, you could have done this, you could have done that, and all that other stuff. That's very different than if you're actually out there on that line with that saber in your hand, or not saber. What's it called? A rapier? Is it?
We've either got saber, epee, or foil. 3 weapons.
Oh, there you go. Okay. See, I'm learning. This is fantastic. I want to get fencing now. When you said it, I was just like, it's just so cool. But the idea is,
even now, if I'm in bed thinking about it, I will wake up, like the adrenaline just shoots through me, and I can't go back to sleep because I get so excited about it. So
yeah, how do you see through that mask? Okay, we're just going to throw a random, because it looks like you can't see anything.
Because this is really, I think this is a great analogy. So first of all, the mask is very important. It protects us from the weapon, obviously, but the mask is so close. It's kind of like if you go to a screen door or something, you get really close to the screen door, you can see everything really, really well. And a lot of people will say, okay, well, you must be watching the tip of the weapon, right? That's what you're keeping your eye on. I'm like, I don't look at that at all. If I'm looking at the tip of the weapon, that's kind of like somebody saying, I'm going to win the World Series, and all I'm focusing on is winning the World Series. You're going to lose the first game. I am looking in my opponent's eyes. That's what I'm looking at. I am not focused on anything else because I can see into his or her soul. I can see into their spirit. I can see everything that they're planning on doing before they're doing it if I'm fully connected. And the same is true here. If we really connect with ourselves, so we're looking at ourselves as the opponent now, rather than looking at the full outcome that I want. I want to become a multimillionaire. And at the end of the day, I didn't become a multimillionaire, so none of this works. But we're looking at, okay, who am I being right this moment? Am I creating and being the kind of person who's a multimillionaire? Am I feeling what it feels like to be a multimillionaire right now? Or am I battling with myself in a way that's going to stop me from producing the outcomes that I want? That's where you're going to really get clear about the actions that are the next steps to take. And one last analogy, if I may, is if we're going to circumnavigate the globe at the equator in an airplane, if we leave off 1 degree, just one tiny little degree, when we get all the way around the globe, we're going to be thousands of miles off from where we wanted to be. Imagine if we took one incremental step towards the direction that we want, one tiny little step every single day. You educated yourself on money. You got clearer about who you are in your relationship to money every single day. By the end of the month, by the end of the year, by the end of the decade, you are going to be worlds apart from where you are now and closer to the destination.
Yeah, I love that. And, I think it was Bill Gates, like him or love him or whatever you want. What he said was, I think it was really important, is most people overestimate what they can get done in a year and underestimate what they can get done in 5. And by making those small changes rather than just massive ones, I think that is how you can really get to the goal line, because you can be really scientific about it. I mean, if you're just steering a car and veering left and veering right, number one, you're going to get whiplash to everybody who's in it. And number two, you're probably going to throw yourself in a ditch. Whereas if you're making minor adjustments, you're going to keep yourself on course and be able to do all the corrections as of necessary. And I think that is when somebody's looking at making those changes, is to do those over a period of time and understand it's going to take time to solve things, and that's okay. Gary Keller actually said, in the one thing that I thought was really powerful is he says intensity is consistency. And that to me is just something that really, I think, resonates, especially as somebody who loves to fire up and get things going, and understand that that needs to happen over a period of time.
Yeah, consistency is the key. The more consistent you are, the better off you're going to be. And I think the further down the journey you get, you start to look at NASCAR drivers. They're traveling at such extraordinary speeds that every movement that they make, the tiniest little adjustment, is critical, and that they're not looking at making big moves because they will be a catastrophic failure. In the beginning, when we're just getting started, we can make bigger shifts like that and it won't have as much an impact. But once we start getting at the speed that we want and having the success that we want, we have to resist the temptation to try something huge and new, and we're going to just blow it up. A lot of people, one of those negative mindsets is they're going to self-sabotage. They're going to self-sabotage. You're just going to blow it up. It's one of the reasons that, lotto winners go broke within the first 5 years. They've won all this money, and yet they don't have a mindset to manage this kind of money. Or I like to say financial thermostat is not set to manage that. And so it's got to disappear the money. And the mind in the background just keeps working, disappear until it's all gone. Yeah. And then they're worse off at the end than they were when they first won. So these are all really mission critical things to keep focused on.
Our whole goal was to really, hit around the idea of talking about mindset, and then, really talking about, the thermostat, financial thermostat, and really helping go through. And I almost feel like those are, you've done such a very good job of such an amazing deep dive into mindset that we would be doing it a disservice to go over some of the other topics. And I'd love to have you back on the show because number one, frequency, I'm feeling the vibe. And I think, the way that you address a lot of the topics, it's been certainly extremely enjoyable.
Steve, thank you. I've had a great time. I obviously love this conversation and this topic, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Now, the next time that we do it, we need to be on one of those lines with a rapier in our hand and really joust back and forth some dialogue. That'd be so much fun.
We'll do some Perry riposte. That'll be great.
There you go. Love it. Well, Pericles, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And the easiest way for people to reach you, what's your best vibe for you to?
2 places, periclesrellis.com or resetyourfinancialthermostat.com. They both go to the same place.
Most people probably would choose number 2 because number 1 is probably incredibly complicated to spell. As a person with a complicated last name, I think you take the cake way more than I do. So, although yours is a cooler name, it's got that such a Herculean vibe when you think about the story on that name.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. This is the money. This is the mindset. This is the mentoring podcast. We'll see you on the next one.